With COVID, for the past few months, we never had as many people working remotely. And governments are issuing warnings that cyber criminals are leveraging on the current situation. As an example, the number of related phishing attacks were multiplied by 7 in February, says multiple reports. In this new world, with new ways of working, new digital tools, the question of the readiness of the financial sectors in regards to cyber threats is even more relevant today than ever. We are very pleased to have with us Christopher Muffat, CEO of Dathena and Barclays, former head of information risk management for Asia. He will walk us through the landscape of cybersecurity in financial services, the complications brought by COVID, and what we can do as an individuals or as an organization to protect us. Please do not hesitate to use the Q&A sections to ask your question during Christopher's keynotes. But before the start, I would like to do a little warm-up. So Chris, good evening. I will throw you words and sentences. Hi, how are you?
Good, and you?
Perfect, perfect. Thanks. So yeah, just like warm up before your keynotes and presentation, I would like you I will be throwing at you like words and sentences, and you have to tell me if it's overrated or underrated. Are you ready for it?
Okay, I hate this game already.
Okay. So what is being lead investigators at HSBC during the Swiss leaks?
Absolutely overrated.
Okay. But what does it mean to be investigators?
Well, it's overrated in a way that you think that you have a very cool job and, on the field with the gun, investigating and chasing the bad guy. In reality, you just spend probably 18 hours or 20 hours per day in front of your computer and looking for data points in order to identify, cyber threats, or in the case of the Swiss leak, who stole HSBC data. So it's a lot of, I would say, data mining work, and it's not very sexy. So that's why I would say it's a bit overrated. But at least I had fun, so I'm pretty happy about it.
Okay, and with a lot of people now using a lot of different VCs tools, so security issues in using Zoom, for example, overrated or underrated?
Well, I think, it's a good question. I think, to be honest, Zoom is a good tool. They have been quite reactive at fixing security issues. Now, we have these 500,000 accounts, user account and password lying on the web. Not sure, where this is coming from, but what I can tell you is that most of the cloud apps today are quite secure. Platform like Zoom are pouring millions of dollars in security, and honestly, I think we can trust them. I think they know what they're doing. What we shouldn't trust is the end user. It's always the weakest link. So if your computer got infected with malware and collect, credentials for Zoom or Microsoft or any other accounts, that might result into the loss of 1,000 or 100 or million of account credentials. So I think, again, I understand the hype around Zoom. I think they are far from being perfect, but they are not entirely responsible for the mess that Zoom users are going through today.
Okay, and AI in cybersecurity?
AI in cybersecurity, I think it's definitely underrated. I think people have underinvested on that field. I was mentioning when I was in HSBC investigating the Swiss leak, you cannot imagine the amount of manual work that it involved. And using algorithms, especially machine learning and AI, can help you to go way faster. Actually, it's about 10,000 times faster. And you have much more accurate results. I don't think we have enough technology today that address the cybersecurity risk leveraging AI. So that's definitely an area where we have to invest. And today, hopefully, I'm just going to tell you why exactly, because I think we face unprecedented challenges. And the bad news is this is just the beginning. So how do we cope with this change? That's what I'm going to try to explore today with you.
And last question, and I think it's related like to one of your answers. So you said one of the weakest links usually is like the end user. So talking about like awareness in cybersecurity, overrated or underrated?
It's a hard one. It's a mixed feeling. I like to say that end users are dumb, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's good to make, to do awareness. You have to educate people, but only to some extent. It cannot be the response to everything. So I think today people are, struggling to find the balance between underinvesting in awareness and overinvesting. Actually, if you look at the last all the studies, especially from Verizon and the data breach incident report that they issue every year, you would see that after a certain investment amount in awareness, the results tend to decrease. So I think it's interesting to have at least a quarterly cybersecurity briefing in your organization and to give the basic stuff that prevent most of the attack. But I don't think we should doing it. So there's clearly some organizations that need to invest more than others, especially regulated organizations such as financial services or especially exposed institutions like healthcare. But I would say that today I don't believe that we have a model that could demonstrate that awareness is working. So we are still going through a learning curve. But I would say that it's not because I'm challenging the power of awareness that you shouldn't invest in that field. You should have at least a quarterly training for every single employee in your company.
Okay, I must be part of the dumbest end users as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris, for answering this silly question and this warm-up. So I will leave you the floor for your keynotes, and I will join a little bit later for the Q&A section.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen. Please, if you don't see it, let me know. So we're going to have 3 parts. Okay, awesome. So we're going to have 3 parts today. I'm going to try to keep it short and nice. I'm not going to emphasize too much on the resolution because it's pretty much the same thing, but rather I would like to insist on why we have to change the way we tackle cyber threats response in today's world, and especially with the current situation with the COVID. After the section 1, please ask questions. Same after section 2, and in the end, of course, you can post your question on the nice chat and Q&A section. It's really fancy, and I will pick up this question and answer it. So please don't hesitate. So. See, I'm the dumbest. I don't even know how to use PowerPoint. But okay, let's go. So today's situation with data. So we have, you can imagine that data is flowing everywhere. So we're literally sending about $300 billion email per day. This is what's happening every single day. So can you imagine the amount of data that we share within your organization and also outside the organization? It's absolutely crazy. For you to understand the paradigm shift that we're going through is that we have produced this year 10 times more data than we produced last year. And these data, contain personal information, they contain business sensitive information. There's a lot of things that we have to protect and that could impact companies, organizations, and people. So if I look at how the data is growing exponentially, if I add to that the fact that we have new regulation like GDPR for data privacy law, now in California you have the CCPA, which is also a data privacy law that protects customer. When you factor the need of a cloud-based tool and modern tools, especially right now, everyone is working remotely. It creates a massive pressure on organizations to not compromise on security, but yet they cannot afford to spend, billions of dollars on that problem. So the question is like, how do you find the right balance with all this lot of data, new regulation, your data is flowing everywhere. You cannot contain that in one data center now, and that it has to go to the cloud. So how can we protect information? Because meanwhile, data breach is the new normal. So literally every single organization today have been hacked, and you have data privacy issue and data leakage, and this is something that we have to get used to it. Last year, just for financial services, in 2019, we had 152 material data breaches that resulted into significant loss of revenue. Actually, if you want to talk about money, the impressive metrics that I like to use is $18.5 million. It's the average cost of a cyber attack for financial services. So don't think that, yeah, it's going to affect a couple of users or not. This is an average. So it means that you may have some attack that will cost you only $1 million, and $1 million is already a lot. But you may have, if you have a massive data breach like HSBC had, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Just for you to understand what was the impact on HSBC after the massive data breach that happened with the private bank. It resulted in a direct cost of $200 million for HSBC, just to run the investigation, to run the remediation, the legal costs, and so on. And most importantly, it impacted people, because if you get hacked as an organization, especially financial services, you undermine what is the most valuable thing in your business, which is trust. So people start to lose trust in your organization and start to leave the bank. As a result, and especially for HSBC, they lost more than 35% of their assets under management. So 35% of the client, went like, okay, I'm gone. And that impact employees. Because of that, HSBC had to lay off roughly 40% of the staff. So it has a huge impact and can cost way more than this $18.5 million from a cost standpoint. Unfortunately, your chief information security officer looked like this. I mean, he's clearly, or she's clearly overwhelmed because of this amount of pressure that he or she received from every single front. Internally, people want to use in the cloud, and they think that the security team is boring because they always say no. On the other hand, you have the regulator that put pressure on the financial services and enforce fines that undermine, the revenue and the profitability of the company. And in the same time, we consume and produce more and more data. So you can imagine that for the chief information, I mean, it's not a good time to be a CISO today unless you rethink how to tackle the problem. And I'm not saying that I have the entire solution today, but at least I'm going to give you a new way on how you can better protect your information in nowadays. If you factor the complication of the COVID today, it's the situation for cybersecurity is already complex. What is more complex is that people now have more time to spend on hacking, and they will try to target number one, healthcare and financial services. So there's a recent study that just appeared from BCG that showed that actually financial services are 300 times more likely to be attacked during any type of crisis. Can be a financial crisis like we had in 2008, or a sanitary crisis like we have right now. And that is quite scary. So we need to do something about it, and we need to react in a timely manner. Any questions from me so far? I see the Q&A is quite full. I'm going to take two questions on that front, if that's okay.
Yeah, which one do you want to take? So I see the first one. What is your opinion on legislative initiatives such as EU Cybersecurity Act?
I think it goes a bit beyond the topic today, but I can summarize it in a very simple way. What it tries to protect is freedom. Freedom at every single level of the nation. So for communities, for individuals, but at the state nation as well. Because we are living in a world where the tech is led by US and China. China tends to serve China only. This is about to change, but we have a limited exposure with China today, and don't take this for granted. For the US, if you take the GAFAM, well, they are all US-based companies, and that is a big issue because of that, it means that the US have a backdoor at every single company and individual that use and consume their services. So it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem for the freedom. It's a huge problem for European company as well. And I do believe that Asia needs to come up together with a similar framework because it's going to be very difficult for them also to protect the interest of their country and the interest of the individual if they don't come up with something like this. So personally, I think it's a really good move from the EU. I don't think it's strong enough, but at least it's the beginning.
And so on the second one, so who do you think are like responsible for cybersecurity in financial institutions? So you talk about like the CISO role. Are there like other roles as well?
So yeah, are you talking about the question too?
No. I was more asking you like the question about like who is responsible about cybersecurity within any financial institutions. So you talk about like the CISO. Is there like also like other like is it falling under like the compliance departments or is there like any other roles that you can share?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question. So I think you have to break down how do you manage risk overall. And the best practice tends to divide the risk management under 3 lines of defense. So the first line for cybersecurity are the end user. You are the one that, making sure that you have a secure password, that you don't leave your laptop unattended. And the end user are always the first barrier for hacking and cybersecurity risk events. The second layer is under the CISO most of the time, and he's responsible or she's responsible, there's more and more women in that field, that's right, to design the control based on the risk appetite that are defined by 2 people, the chief risk officer and the chief compliance officer. So the compliance officer will give the business objective from the compliance perspective. The chief risk officer will have a purely operational risk and financial risk perspective on things. So the CISO needs to design, implement, and run this control. He can also delegate the execution of this control by other team. But when I talk about control, think about encryption, think about access control, think about email monitoring, that sort of things. So there is not one single person that will solve all your cybersecurity problem. It's an organization effort, and everyone in the company should be involved at some point in the cybersecurity.
Okay, thank you very much, Christopher. It's really clear. If you want to continue, we'll take on the other question maybe a little bit later on.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I'm glad we have some questions. But you're going to see, the presentation is almost over now. I'm just going to move to my presentation first. Okay, cool. Sorry for this. So I'm not that tech savvy, in the end. So I'm getting old. We discussed about the fact that the COVID situation is creating more anxiety on the society, and people are more vulnerable. So you have hackers that take that as an opportunity to leverage the anxiety of people, to impersonate, employees bank, to ask for credential or to hack directly a system, because now everyone is going to the cloud. So for a hacker, going to the cloud is great, because if you don't do that in a secure manner, you're actually opening your organization to the entire world. With the current situation today, we are seeing a 12x acceleration and cloud tool adoption in a month. So in March itself, we have adopted worldwide more cloud tools than the entire 2019. And that is crazy. The reason is because of this work from home situation. The information team cannot say no, because if the business cannot operate, it goes like a bigger issue. But doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything about it. We have to address the problem in a timely manner. And I would say that we have to target the problem really by targeting what is the most important thing that we need to protect. So what to do? Yeah, I'm gonna be a bit, that can surprise you. We have to accept to be hacked, and that's okay. It's gonna happen to everyone. If you have a house, if someone is going into a garden, you might be annoyed, but that is okay. And you cannot secure everything. It's gonna take too long and cost too much. Instead, make sure that you put lock on really what's really matter. So if you have gold in your house, you just want to protect the gold. You don't have to take care of the rest. The key is also to automate. You probably don't have the skills and the workforce to scale cybersecurity. But now you have tools like RPA, machine learning, and AI that can define your focus, what you should focus on, where is your gold, where is your crown jewel within your organization. This is what really you have to, that's the exercise that takes a little bit of time, to do. But once you do it, really, you will be able to have a very clear action plan on what are the users that you need to protect and monitor, and what are the application and server that you need to monitor, because they know that they have a huge confidentiality risk or a huge data privacy risk. And using AI is actually very, very simple and straightforward. Just imagine like any image recognition that you have on the market, or even with your phone. My phone here, Chinese made, is doing that as well. The phone and the camera can recognize through AI algorithm, the shape of object, and therefore define the value. So similarly, if you apply the AI to any piece of information, can be stored in application, in databases, or in documents, you can identify, what is the shape of this document. Does it look like a status, or it looks like a lamp? And you can actually associate the value just by visualizing the data. So you have tools on the market that does that. And they will identify many things. Number one is, what is the data that we're talking about? So is it like an accounting tax document? Is it a bank statement, and so on? And because you define the topic of the document, like you would define the object type, you will be able to identify the value of this information. And on the top of it, you can also identify whether or not we are talking about people. So this AI automation is way faster and more accurate than any human that can do. And this is where you can actually save cost and fast track remediation from a cloud adoption perspective, and also to make sure that you comply with data privacy law. So just to summarize what I just said, it's a bit complex, but and that's almost the end. We saw that at the beginning of the presentation, we have generated more data. We're going to generate more data this year than we have generated last year. So actually 10 times. But it doesn't mean that you have to protect everything. And this is what I meant by accept to be hacked. So based on the study that we have done, we noticed that the data that could pose certain risk for any organization, especially financial services, are 5%. 95% of your information can be leaked. Yes, you will have some reputation impact, but it's not going to be so much material. Actually, only 5% of this information is crucial, and you should put all your effort in protecting that and deprioritize the other 95%. So if I can finalize on beyond AI, you still have to apply basic practice and risk remediation practice. Everyone is working from home, and that's great. I love it. But you use a Wi-Fi connection. Just please, make sure that's not the admin password or 123 or whatsoever. Ask your kid or your neighbor set up a password for you that you keep, by the way. Don't share with him. But make sure that you have a Wi-Fi password, and public Wi-Fi to do remote connection. It's a no-go. Even if you have a VPN or whatsoever, just forget it. Complex password, please. The most used password last year was password, and that has been the case for a decade. This is ridiculous. So please be a bit creative, and don't store everything on your laptop. People think, oh no, if I store everything on my laptop, it's going to be secure. Not so much. It's most likely that your laptop is less secure than OneDrive or Dropbox or any cloud tool as long as you have a strong password and also a two-factor authentication. The COVID situation also speed up the phishing attack. Everyone is asking for solving complex situation, wiring money, giving password. Don't do that. If not sure, just call your friend or your colleague, because even if you don't work with them, they are always a call away. For corporate, and especially from financial services perspective, the number one key is access management. And so think it's okay to give access to all your cloud tool, but you should recertify all accesses on this cloud tool at least on a quarterly basis, if not monthly, and make sure that you have a full inventory of the users that can access the cloud resources. Once you have done that, you can enforce protection on what really matters, and especially using AI, as we just saw. You take a picture of your data and you recognize what is important, and then you can focus on protecting that only by enforcing encryption, for instance, or establishing monitoring rules that will look at the data flow, what's going outside and inside. This way, you have a cost-efficient approach for you to navigate through this difficult time that we are going through. And I'm afraid that this is now the new normal.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. It was really clear. Thank you again. Trying to be mindful of time. I think we have the time to take 2 more questions before leaving the floor to Charose. So taking the first one, what role do you think states and international organizations should play in the context of cybersecurity?
As I said, I think it's related to the other question. It's they have a big play, and regulation is key. I know that regulation is annoying everyone. I mean, I spent 10 years in bank, and I can tell you, having a regulatory audit is not a fun time, but is necessary. If we are too easygoing on the rules and regulation, we are not protecting ourselves enough to, with different nations. And it doesn't really matter if you're from the US or from China or from Europe. What really matters is that we have tools to protect the individual freedom. This is all that matters for you to be able to take decision on, where you're going to have, when you're going to go for food, or what type of item you want to buy on the internet. This is key. You have to remain, to some extent, in control of your decision and thought process. On the other side, organization needs to rely on this control framework, because yes, it's painful to implement, but in the end, it will safeguard the economy and make sure that people don't get hacked, organizations don't get hacked, and that would result into loss of revenue and loss of jobs.
And I think I will be a little bit selfish on asking one of my own questions. So we talk about like cybersecurity in financial services. So taking the case of CFTE, being a startup, working the fintech industries, any advice for startup like us in regards to cyber threats?
I think try to limit your footprint. It's in a startup, and I mean now Romain, I run a startup as well. You want to give a lot of freedom to people in that school, but just make sure that you know exactly what do you use on the internet and what information do you store. And you don't need AI for that, by the way, because you're a small organization. Just make sure that you have a management meeting where you can simply say, hey, these are the tools that I use, they're cool. Number one, you can save costs because I'm sure your colleagues are using similar tools, but you're paying a subscription twice. So that's a third benefit from it. And the second is, put in place simple rules, what you are okay to share on the cloud, on the internet, and why you're okay, not to share. I think establishing the basic best practice could save you. Again, in a startup, you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of time. So just make sure that you enforce, the basic principle that I just shared with you: Wi-Fi password, strong password, and that you renew every 3 or 6 months. Encryption, and use the tools that you have on the internet. I mean, I don't want to be an advocate of Microsoft, but if you use Office 365 today, even if you're not a cybersecurity expert, you can enforce simple security rules across your entire organization from the admin console. So educate yourself a little bit and try to keep it lean in terms of risk exposure by adopting too many cloud tools.
Okay, great. Thanks. I think we'll take your advice. So thank you very much, Chris, for your participations, and thank you all also for your involvement and your questions. So we are now at the end of the sessions. We ran out of time, sadly. Thank you again, Christophe.
Thanks.